kept raising more and more questions for me. Like the deeper I got into that data, the more I was like, what's going on over here?
Yeah. Hello and welcome to episode 167 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday, the 20th of May. I hope you've had a great week and you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. Just a quick warning, I do swear this week. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I started this podcast to share the marketing street knowledge I've picked up on my journey from techie to CMO with the help of some true rockstars, my guests and chums, old and new, that I've met along the way. You can find links to me, my guests, and all the things we talk about in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our street knowledge blog, and please get in touch if we can inspire your inner rockstar. This week, Jeff Clark and I take a trip to the Rockstar CMO swimming pool. I get a backstage pass to CMSY's State of the CMO report with their VP of Research, Sara Kimmel, and I wind down the week with Robert Rose in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our weekly dose of marketing street knowledge from our resident Rockstar CMO strategy advisor and former Forrester research director.
Welcome, Ian Truscott, to the Rockstar swimming pool.
I think we should have rehearsed that. I think, aren't you? You're welcoming me to the studio to talk
I know,
about
but because we're talking about swimming pool topics, that I figured we'd go outside.
Yes.
Hang out by the pool as opposed to in the studio. When the sun's out and you're in the studio, I don't know. I just want to get outside.
I don't know. Should I leave this in or should we restart? Oh, let's leave it in. All right, buddy. Well, I'm glad to be here by the pool with you. The weather is beautiful there in Massachusetts, as it is here, right?
Absolutely. We're across both sides of the pond. The sun is out.
Yes.
In the middle, it might be cloudy in Iceland, but
but just to explain, as regular listeners know, we have a regular feature on the podcast called the Rockstar CMO Swim Pool. What is it? It's our portal to hell, to where we throw all the bullshit, snake oil, and things that plague this industry we love. And I ask all the guests to give me a contribution to the pool. And this week, Jeff, we're going to hang out here by the pool and have a look at what some of the things that people have chucked in. I know you've picked a top 5.
Yes.
So we'll go through those. Top effing 5, may I say?
Effing 5 dips into the pool.
And we all know that I love saying effing 5. And also a quick shout out to Riaz Kanani, who I had on the show last week. And on LinkedIn, so if you swing by the Rockstar CMO LinkedIn, you'll see our mention, has started quite a discussion about his nomination for the Rockstar CMO swimming pool. So that was very nice of him. So thank you very much, Riaz. Okay, so let's get cracking. So we've got these 5, and due to the fact that we actually prepare, although I don't know if the listener would notice, we have the 5 listed here. So let's kick off with Tim Hines from episode 108. He is the marketing star and author, podcast, show host, keynote speaker, and consultant. Hello, Tim. He nominated Marketing Must Work in a Crisis Mode and Give In to the Demands from Execs. He wants to throw that in the pool. What do you say, Jeff?
The first question is, do we let the execs come out even though we want we may want to leave the topic in, but they pay for marketing, so maybe. But this is this is just like a tough issue in so many companies that I've worked for, you've worked for, is where people expect. Marketing is kind of like it is a service organization to the rest of the the company, and so you're kind of in the mode if the company wants to be in crisis mode, or if an exec makes a demand, it's like you say, "Oh, what do you do?" I don't know. I guess we gotta follow through on it. And I think one of the things is that CMOs really have to help to set a kind of tenor where it's like just like stopping things and going off and doing something in a crisis. It's unproductive. It's demotivating typically to employees. So we in marketing, we got to get ahead of it. So we got to have service level agreements, and yes, we want to be agile. We want to be able to, if we need to, we want to be able to just shift some directions. But you can't just keep shifting directions, or you get nowhere. But you might also want to have a crisis management process in place, so for when there really is a crisis, we're going to get bought, or we're going to, something happens, we get a cybersecurity attack, and it's like, then the team knows what's the process? How do we react? Who's in charge of that?
Yeah. But it could be a PR crisis, couldn't it?
Could be a PR crisis. Could be all kinds of
airline that breaks somebody's guitar or whatever it was. It's an old reference. But,
That's right.
So, and what do you say? So the nomination is marketing must work in crisis mode and give in to demands from execs. Do we leave that in the pool? Or
I say we stay in because the point he was making, must work in crisis mode is it's the kiss of death, and as he said, everything is not life or death.
It's just marketing.
Yes.
Right. Okay, that's splendid. So that one stays in. Well done, Tim. Next up, Laurie Jones from episode 114, the CEO of Avasec Communications. Brands believing that a digital advertising approach is going to solve all their problems. She chucked that right in. So what do you say to that, Jack?
Well, I said, she had said, for one thing, she said, there's very few digital first companies that are successful. So, and I think part of the point that she was making is that, so digital is not new any longer, but digital does not encompass the entire set of engagement that you have with your prospects and customers. So it's like, it is now, what was once, a trendy wave is now, it's just part of business. So, you have to look at a comprehensive buyer journey and see where people engage, digital, non-digital, do your research, on how to, everything from the beginning of the process through to sales engagement. So, so I totally agree with her. Just got to focus on that entire journey and work each stage and each team member to understand how to engage with them most or best.
Yeah, cool. So I'm sensing that staying in. As you said, you agree.
That's staying in.
Right, so we're keeping in brands believing that a digital advertising approach is going to solve all their problems. Well done, Laurie. Another one that's staying in. I should have like a bell or something, shouldn't I?
That's right, or
a
splash
noise. Yeah. All right, let's move on to number 3. This is Tim Parkin from episode 117. He's a global consultant, advisor, and executive coach. He nominated artificial intelligence and algorithms are going to save you and replace marketing fundamentals. How relevant is this one? And this is from back at 117 before all this chat GPT fuss.
I know it was. And I think, given our emphasis in the show on marketing fundamentals, nothing replaces fundamentals.
The F in fundamentals.
Yeah. So his point is marketing is always about people. People know best how to market to people. And so I think that the reality is that, people will set the rules by which the AI engines operate, and they may help they are helping make our work more productive, efficient, enable us to do things that we weren't able to do humanly possible before. I think it's being proven that delivers results. Obviously, there's some of the issues. There could be, as I've heard, because we have these congressional hearings on AI right now, and it's like, it could make jobs. It could take jobs away. I mean, that is kind of the reality of these new technologies as they get introduced. So I think that, just from the way he phrased what goes into the pool, that it probably stays in, and we may want to revisit it in 6 months. It definitely doesn't replace fundamentals, but it may end up knowing the fundamentals better than you and I do.
You took away my bell moment when I asked you whether it stays in or not. But there you go.
Sorry.
But I think the emphasis, like you say, is are going to save you. So it's like, and I think that's probably where a lot of that conversation is happening just with ChatGPT. Yes, it's a bigger conversation about whether actually artificial intelligence is going to kill all of us. But the save you bit is, instead of doing the fundamentals and doing things properly, you just lazily type something into ChatGPT. So I'm with you, mate. This should stay in. But I think it's a good point what you're saying there about we should revisit, because obviously this thing is moving quite fast, isn't it?
It is moving quite fast. Yeah.
All righty. So where are we at? Well, we didn't put any numbers on these, anyway. So we're on to number 4.
Number 4.
Already, we're trotting through these. It's going quite well. Kurt Gendon from episode 123 of marketing firm True Voice, he nominated The Death of Third-Party Cookie is just so overhyped. So he wants the hype around third-party cookies to go in the pool. What do you think?
I think that probably is... I think that makes sense. Of course, are we throwing the cookies in the pool, or are we throwing the hype in the pool? I think we're throwing the hype in the pool, and cookies in the pool gets messy. But I think that his point, as I listened to it, further, was kind of like, the impact of marketers just isn't as great as advertised. Obviously, Chrome is making a big deal out of it. It is the dominant web browser out there. 2/3 of the market. They're looking at other ways of helping to do targeted advertising. So they're, rolling out some new capabilities, which I was supposed to think was coming early this year, but maybe it's obviously being delayed.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reality is that, how do you do targeting in a privacy-driven world? And I think that's one of the points that Kurt made. You've got 72% of America. There was a blog from HubSpot that noted 72% of Americans feel anxious about being tracked online. 71% of marketers worry about their ability to collect information on their prospects. Oh my gosh, I think there's a marriage there.
But just on that point, sorry to interrupt. There's different studies, isn't there? Because when they ask consumers, do you want relevant content, relevant advertising and offers, and people say yes. So there's some of this is about selling personalization and stuff, isn't it, from a marketer's perspective, and I understand, and Americans or any consumer feeling that they're getting value out of this, right? So
and it's tough when as a consumer, you deal with so many different companies you're buying from and so many different brands, and then it's like when everybody is trying to get you because they figured out that you're about to buy something. I always hate when I get ads for things that I actually already bought it. It's like now I'm getting pummeled about some product I was searching for 3 months ago. But anyway, I think and this is similar to one of our earlier points about thinking about the broad set of engagement, which is, I guess, his point about the fact that it's not as great as advertised. As first party cookies still work. You can use tactics to collect, preferences. If what you're really looking for is what are the preferences of the people who I'm engaging with on my website or through other channels, there are other ways to do that. Google will still be tracking groups of people, but not individuals. So targeted advertising will still keep working. It's particularly, one guy I was listening to said, particularly on social platforms, if you do the advertising on social platforms, you still get the ability to target on preferences. And the critical thing is you should be aggregating data across all of your sources of engagement. So again, the digital and non-digital engagement, you really need to work to make sure you're tracking all of that, because that really helps you build the picture of the preferences of your prospects and customers. And the third-party cookie is just not necessarily a big part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. In the end. And there's actually some research which I shall feature in the next segment of this very show by the CMS Wire, who actually did some research into how CMOs feel about the death of the third-party cookie and all this hype and fear-mongering. And actually, people like Kurt suggested, people are pretty chilled about it. We know that privacy is coming. We can sense what the consumer feels, and we see all these studies. And so, yes, we as marketers are going to need to do some other techniques, some of those you described there, Jeff. But are we worried about it? Is it a big hype? Doesn't seem to be so much. So, what do you say? Is it? Are we staying in or
keep it in the pool?
Keep it in the pool. So it's the
hype. As it gets hot in July, being in the pool is probably a better place to be anyway. So let's keep it in there.
So, Kurt, the death of a third-party cookie is just so overhyped. Stays in the pool. Ting! That's pathetic, isn't it? That's just not a sound effect at all. All right, so I should have. I should have brought a glass or something that I could hit. All right. The next one is Caitlin Sorensen from episode 126. She's the president. She's got an amazing job title. She's the president of Trajet, and she's also the CEO of Loomly and Sendable, some social media platforms
a lot of hats.
you might be familiar with.
Yeah,
she has. And I like the way she was teetering on the edge of the pool there, looking over the balcony with Metaverse in her hand. We're going to chuck that in the pool. And then changed her mind and decided that voice search was what she was going to chuck in. What say you, Jeff?
I think we should ask her to chuck Metaverse in so we can talk about that in a future episode. But
I did a whole special episode on Metaverse because kind of like that this big debate broke out on LinkedIn between a couple of folks I know. So I had them on to discuss it, and I don't think we conclusively decided. But I think it's in the pool now, right? Nobody's talking about it now.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to voice
search. Well, the thing is, yes. And as she says, it has a place in the car, in the kitchen, but it won't help you get in front of people. And I think that, and she was, inferring that we were going to get past voice search and get into video search, image search, other ways. And to me, this is, very device dependent. And so in business to consumer marketing advertising, it is absolutely, it's there, and people are using it, whether it's on their phone or in Alexa or whatever.
Yeah.
In B2B, probably not. I
agree with you on that. That it's probably stronger in B2C, but you've got to imagine if you're the sort of person that interacts with your computer through voice or your devices through voice. If you're asking a question, what song should I play or what pair of sneakers should I wear, you're going to say, what's the best web analytics tool, or what's what email product should I use? Or so, you're naturally going to do that. I would imagine it would bleed across if you're that kind of person.
Well, and I think that this is where things that become, very common in business to consumer or in our other lives. They work their way into the business to business world. So so that's why I say it's device dependent, and it's like as the devices evolved and as we get more comfortable, even though we might be sitting in our laptop, if we get comfortable using the voice capabilities of the laptop and or whatever, or we get new devices that come along, then you've really you got to prepare for it. So I think that the thing is that, which is the hard part for marketers, is how do I make sure that my content that I'm putting out there is optimized for being recognized in voice search. So a couple of things I was reading about is, create a list of questions to guide your copy so that you're sort of answering what people might be asking. And then it might be how they're asking it versus voice versus even if they're typing it in, in the command bar or the search bar. And as the other search tactics, use of long tail keywords, etc., putting that into your content. I mean, there are a variety of ways, which are probably ways that you would use for search engine optimization, that if you just think about how it might apply to voice search, you're probably preparing.
I think there's a couple of other things on this as well. When I've been asked about voice search, and I've used it in the instance of brand, for example. So I think that if you're if you're Nike, for example, you're going to want me to ask Alexa for a pair of Nike trainers, not ask for a pair of black trainers or blue trainers or whatever I want, right? So they want to do a lot of brand awareness, the normal old school brand building, right? So that I do that. So because you don't have that sophistication of choice, if you type in something into the search bar, you get 150,000 choices, and you make that choice. Whereas with voice, it's not going to read out 150,000 choices. It's going to say which one. And the other part of that is, as I listen to the way you were saying we should construct our content so it answers questions, I was then thinking about ChatGPT, because I thought to myself, if you're writing content that answers questions, that's that same interface. And it's also the same interface as voice in that it doesn't give you 1,000 answers like Google does. It tries to give you the right one, right? So it tries to give you what it thinks
is the right one.
Yeah. So it kind of works both ways. So this is a really interesting topic, and I think it goes beyond voice search. And I almost wish Caitlin had tossed in metaverse, because I think that would have been a clearer decision between us.
Well, so let's call her back.
Yeah. So Jeff, is this staying in or coming out?
I think this comes out. I think we get a towel, and we we invite it back out of the pool and let it dry off and sit in the sun for a while. And bring it a cocktail.
I'm sorry, Caitlin. So voice search has come out of the pool, yeah, I don't have a sound effect for that. What would be the sound effect for something coming out of the pool? Sort of a whooshing noise or something coming out. Anyway, buddy, that's good. We managed to crack through those 5. I was worried whether we would. So the last item on the agenda is these things. Well, 4 of them continue to bob around in the pool, and the other one basks on the side with a cocktail. What song are we playing out with today?
We're playing. We're going to go with the fact that most of these stay in the pool with a song called "Jump in the Pool" by Friendly Fires, 2008. It says, "I could tell you that you wanted to jump in the pool." So go for it.
That's absolutely perfect. So I'll be playing out with Jump in the Pool by Friendly Fires from 2008. And if we get the location right of whether we're going to be in the studio or by the pool or anywhere of your choosing, will you be there next week?
Yes. Wherever that is.
I look forward to it, mate. I'll see you next week.
See ya.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you, Jeff. That was a tiny bit of Jump in the Pool by Friendly Fires from 2008. And if you have something you'd like to get off your chest that would make a splash in our portal to marketing hell, give us a shout on the socials. We are Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn and Twitter. Right, time to go backstage with my guest. Sara Kimmel is the VP of Research at Simpler Media Group, where she leads the CMS Wire Insights and Reworked Insights research, covering a wide range of topics, including customer experience, marketing leadership, employee experience, and modern HR leadership. Sara has 20 plus years of experience in original research across a broad range of technology, HR, and learning and development topics, and her latest research in this new report for CMS Wire is a fascinating read. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Sara, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Ian.
Hey, it's great. Having somebody on from CMS Wire is brilliant for me. I think before I hit record, we were talking about how I made my first contribution, I think back in 2009, always been a fan of your work. But actually, I've already mentioned CMS Wire and what you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Sara. What is it that you do?
Sure. I am the Vice President of Research at Simpler Media Group. And before that, I spent about 8 years being the Vice President of Research for Human Capital Media, which was Chief Learning Officer and Workforce. And before that, I was on the Global Learning team at Accenture, where I was doing research on learning impact. And how learning impacted performance inside of an organization. And for everybody who doesn't know about Simpler Media Group and CMS Wire, Simpler Media Group is a media, events, and research business with 2 public brands, CMS Wire and reworked. CMS Wire is focused on customer experience, and reworked is focused on employee experience. And both of them tend to have a particular focus on digital experience, either for the customer or for the employee.
Yeah, no, I love it. And say hello to Bryce when you see him next. The guy who runs Simpler Media. He's somebody that many of my colleagues and friends in the industry know very well. So Simpler Media, a friend of yours, I feel I should say. So I want to get to your work at CMS Wire, because you've produced a report called The State of CMO, which we'll talk about in a second. And I'm very lucky that when we planned this just a moment ago before I hit record, we realized that we have way too much to cover in 20 minutes. So I'm going to have you back next week and we'll talk about that a bit more. But let's start again, go back to you. So you've got this career in research. What inspired you to choose that path? And one of the things I do want to say is I think research is fascinating. I think all of us marketers need research, right? So folks like you are our friends. So what inspired you to choose research?
Okay, so I'm a social scientist by training and by education. Originally, I thought I was going into anthropology, and I started down that path. And then when I kind of got into the weeds in anthropology in grad school, realized that anthropology is weirdly theoretical. And it's not very practical, and it's not really focused on problem solving or any of those sorts of things. And so that it wasn't really what I wanted. And I ended up going more broadly into social science. And almost immediately at the point at which I left grad school, I was recruited by the director of performance measurement at Accenture, who had all of these side projects that he wanted to do, almost all of them involving research or some research of some flavor. So I actually spent about 10 years having interesting problem after interesting problem thrown at me, and eventually ended up on the learning team on the strategy side at Accenture, doing what I can only tell you was amazingly fun research into their hundreds of thousands of employees and the way that they learn, and what defines kind of high performance for the employees. Super fun job. From there, I was actually recruited to go to human capital media as well, like because of my role at Accenture. So I just ended up, there was this kind of like flow to the way I just ended up in one research role after another. And it's good though. It's like, if I'm not problem solving, I'm bored. Research is a great place to think. And to kind of figure something out. And I kind of need that.
I think the interesting thing about your story there, and it's nice to have a researcher on the show. Obviously, normally I'm talking to marketers or agency folks and CMOs. And the amount of people I talk to who've got successful careers like yours fell into it through serendipity and just stuck with it for a period of time, then find themselves some period later going, oh, well, this is my career now.
Right. Like the trick to it, I think, is not thinking that there was some way it was supposed to go. Being able to take the opportunities as they come up and kind of embrace them, even if it's not quite what you thought it would be.
And also your current work. So we'll get to the report that you've just done. How are you finding working with marketers and CMOs compared to that fascinating role that you had around learning?
Okay, so marketers are completely different. I will say that, like, they're much more incentive driven on the research side. It's harder to reach them. My role is split between the customer experience on one side and the employee experience on the other. And the employee experience is much more familiar to me. That's your HR and your senior executives and people focused on like how to improve the employee experience and diversity and all of those issues, which I'm very familiar with. It was the CX side of the house that was actually the kind of the challenge for me. I started with all of the data that we had on the digital customer experience side, which immediately just kept raising more and more questions for me. Like the deeper I got into that data, the more I was like, what's going on over here? Like who are these people? What's happening? And it was all of that actually led to the creation of the State of the CMO survey at the end of last year. We thought to ourselves, like, okay, so one of the mysteries inside of the data that we had was that customer experience appears to be kind of split up into a bunch of different functions. Like marketing has a piece of it, sales has a, customer support has a little bit, the senior executives are throwing their 5 cents in, everybody's got a little piece of customer experience. It's like a tug of war. And we thought to ourselves, like, okay, we need to understand the critical roles that are involved in shaping the customer experience better. And the role we decided to start with was the CMO.
I love it.
Probably the most critical role for shaping and figuring out how to construct and create the customer experience.
Right.
So that's where we started.
Yeah, well, a couple of great things there. One is thank you for segueing straight into your report, which is what I was just about to do. So that's fantastic. But the other one there is, so the fact that you guys went for the CMO first, is that a reflection on the fact that that's where you see CX needing to live with the CMO? Is that the guy or gal on the C-suite who needs to be leading this?
Okay, so here's how I think about it. What I think is I'm trying to figure out what's the most strategic role connected to customer experience, right? Yeah. And I mean, you could say maybe it's the C-suite or the senior executive, but they don't. I mean, given the MarTech stack now, they're not expert. And I actually have some data that shows that when your C-suite is making the decisions on your platforms, they're not working as well.
Right.
Right. And if you think about, like, logically, where does the construction of the customer strategy, like the go-to-market, like all of that live? That lives in the marketing function. Right. Like who should be figuring out the customer journey? Who should be figuring out how to make the technology work in order to reach everyone? That's marketing. So marketing's the most strategic role, like the most obvious place for that to live. Yeah,
and I think increasingly, particularly in SaaS companies, we're needing to extend beyond the purchase and look after the customer once they're on board, right? Because now we're challenged with SaaS, with churn and keeping people engaged and active, right? So I think that sounds fairly natural. And of course, as a CMO myself, I'm delighted that you chose our role first. So tell us about the, so the report is called The State of CMO, Insights from the 2023 Annual Chief Marketing Officer Survey, and it's available on your website, and I'll include a link to it in the show notes. What was the scope of the research? How many people did you talk to? How did that go? What's the background behind it?
Okay. So we did have it's north of 700. I know that it's more than 700 marketing leaders participated in the survey. So everyone who participated in the survey leads the marketing function in whole or part. We have it that way because sometimes in much larger organizations, the marketing function will be broken up into growth marketing or, a lot of different things. And we wanted to make sure that we were capturing the people who were, putting marketing strategy together for at least a big piece of the organization. Yeah. So about 700 people participated in it who are all involved in leading marketing. Right. This research was conducted in November and December of last year, so it's not very old. We're only in May here. Yeah. This was a kind of a lightning fast report that we put together. And let me see here. It is all of this is available for free. Yes. On CMS Wire. If you go to, hold on one second here. I think it's cmswire.com/stateofcmo.
Right. Yeah. And like I say, I'll include the link as well. And I think if you just do a quick search on CMS Wire, you can probably quite easily find it. So it's very cool. So it's I've downloaded it, and I downloaded it for free. And I, in fact, after downloading it, thought, I really want to talk to CMS Wire about this thing, right? So that's how we got hooked up. Thank you for accepting my invite. But it's a 50-page report. It's dripping with insight, and I'm not reading some ad survey. I actually believe that. And it offers 10 key takeaways. And as I mentioned at the beginning, thank you very much for agreeing to come back, and we'll talk about some of those takeaways in a bit more depth, because I think you and I recognize that we could probably go on about this for a bit, right? Once we had
a couple of hours, I think. We wanted to.
Exactly. I'd love to. I feel good that we're going to be able to do that dive in. But if you could give us the highlights, what are a couple of things that, without giving away, what we're going to talk about next week, because I'll make this a two-parter, or for anybody who wants to download the actual report, what are the highlights for you? What came through as a research that you thought, well, that's quite exciting?
Okay, there were a couple of things. One is we started taking a look at what are the critical skills for the role.
Yeah.
And from the marketer's perspective, so from the CMO's perspective, what are the critical roles? Not what other CEOs think, not, what's out there, in the Wall Street Journal or what people are talking about with marketing, but like from the perspective of marketers themselves, what do they think are those critical skills? And there were some surprises there,
right?
In terms of the way that they think about their role. The biggest surprise being that they actually creative thinking was their number, and it wasn't just a little bit like, oh, they're number one. It was their number one by something like 20 or 30 percentage points.
Wow.
It was a huge difference. Right. It was like a giant signal inside the noise of the data saying this is super important. This is how marketers think about themselves. We also were looking at, okay, what do they think they need to develop in the future? We were very interested in whether or not they thought they had needed to develop a lot of technical skills. It's certainly something that we hear a lot about. That turned out to be true. And it's not only true that they needed to develop technical skills, but they think they still need to.
Right.
They're not done.
Right.
And then, we looked a little bit into where we saw technical advances in marketing happening and how that was kind of interacting with the role. Big changes that they saw coming for their role. Like, where did they think they were going to have to do, or what did they think? How did they think the role was changing? And there were not huge surprises there. A lot of those changes were things that we anticipated. The tighter partnership with the sales team, more use of technology, that kind of thing. And then we did find a couple of other nuggets that were that ended up being super interesting. That marketers are a lot less concerned with changing privacy regulations than you might think. We really thought that they would, be tearing their hair out, but they're totally not. Apparently, they're bored with it. They've been thinking about it for a while, and I guess they've solved that that problem. And then there were two other things that really struck me. One is that CMOs, it's a terminal role. Like, people think of it once they're a CMO, if they're a CMO of a larger organization, that's it. That's the pinnacle of their career. That's where they wanted to be. But if they're at a smaller company, and they're a CMO, they might be headed somewhere else. That's probably not the terminal role that they were looking for.
But were they looking for larger CMO roles then? I mean, because I think there's a lot talked about the dead end, which is CMO, that, not many CEOs come from the ranks of the CMO. That usually comes from operations or sales. So is that what you're seeing? Is that it's like,
or a trip into consulting?
Of course.
Which also always seems to be the kind of end of career path for a lot of executive roles.
Right. So, so this report is really CMOs on CMOs. And I think what's quite interesting here is if one was to look at the popular zeitgeist that's being mentioned about CMOs and about, I think the technical skills one is probably fairly hackneyed, but I think it's interesting you're saying the CMOs feel that they're creative. I think that's awesome, and hopefully that's what other people think as well. But did you hear anything about sort of like some of the popular tropes around tenure, for example, or any of that stuff? But how did CMOs feel about some of those things?
About tenure?
Yeah. Like we're always saying, that there's the CMO role is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Did you feel a confidence through the research about about the CMO role, about the importance of the CMO role, I guess. I'm not saying this because I am a CMO and I'm looking for reassurance. I'm just wondering if any of these, I'm just testing some of these popular, tropes and things that we hear about the CMO, how that came about from your research, because it's actually CMOs on CMOs, right?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think I can answer this. They're not pessimistic about the role. They're not. They do seem to be kind of excited, but I think that they're very aware of the challenge that's in front of them.
Yeah.
And when we got into the all of these insights come from the comments from the survey, people kind of talking about it in their own words. Yeah. And what you notice immediately in the comments is how nuanced they are when they're talking about what the future holds for them. They're like, well, we've got to get all this data integration, and we have to, all of these platforms have to come together. And okay, wait, we also need to, get leadership on board, and we need to balance this out with privacy. And then, I mean, it's just this kind of long laundry list of things that they feel like all need to be accomplished simultaneously. And so that's kind of the place where the role of the CMO is right now, in this place that it is transforming into something much more sophisticated than it has been up to this point. And one of the points that some of the marketing leaders made in their comments were things like, it's getting to be, because of the MarTech stack and the sophistication of a lot of this, it's getting to be that you can't just plug somebody in from another part of the business to the marketing role and have that work out. It's very specialized now, and it's becoming something that you have to dedicate a lot more time to understanding and figuring out the technology and sort of developing yourself in order to be good at it.
Right. So the rise of the professional marketer, as it were, rather than the hack.
Yeah, I think that's where we are.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting and very reassuring. Thank you very much. But we'll dive into some of that next week. Well, it'll be next week. I mean, for us, we're going to do it in a minute. I'll give away our secret, but we'll dive into that a bit more next week, and we'll dive into your top 7. And I'm going to move to our final question because we're running out of time. We have a regular feature, the Rockstar CMO, our portal to marketing hell, where we throw all the bullshit snake oil and overhyped trends that plague this industry we love. As a researcher, what would you chuck in?
Okay. The idea that you're going to get anywhere as a marketer, like anywhere important or effective, without serious customer journey work.
Right.
Is what I would chuck into the abyss forever and let it burn. So I did an analysis last year of data from our State of the Digital Customer Experience study. And what I was trying to figure out was why personalization is stalled.
Right.
Why is it that forward progress, like more organizations are just not becoming better at personalization? Why is that, right?
Yeah.
And so I went looking for, and I started, cutting the data and doing regressions and trying to figure out like what's predictive.
Yeah.
And yes, larger organizations are a little bit better at it. And yes, organizations with more tools are a little bit better at it. But the single most predictive variable for whether or not organizations are deriving benefits from personalization is how well they say they understand their customers' behavior. So like UX isn't enough, tools aren't enough, you can't throw money at it to fix it. Scott Galloway said at our conference last week that people do things for their own reasons, not for yours.
Yes.
And if you don't understand what those reasons are, you have almost no hope of marketing effectively and personalizing effectively for them.
Oh, that's brilliant. And that also brings together a couple of things I'm interested in, which is your publication. And I had completely missed that you had Scott Galloway presenting at was it in Austin, wasn't it? And and on his podcast, he was talking about being in Austin, and I hadn't connected the two. So, well, congratulations for having Scott there as a presenter. I imagine it was an excellent keynote. But that's brilliant. I love that. Thank you very much, coming from a researcher. So when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm at Sara Kimmel on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find if you just search me for Sara Kimmel at SMG. I used to be on Twitter, but it's becoming a little unusable. So
Yeah, I think a lot of us aren't as much on Twitter as we used to be. But that's fantastic. I'll include all your links in the show notes. And I'm looking forward to welcoming you back on the podcast next week, where we're going to dive into your top 7 from that report. I'm looking forward to that. I'll speak to you then.
Thank you.
Sarah.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Sarah. As I mentioned, a lot in their report to cover in 20 minutes. I hope you agree it's worth us continuing with a deeper dive next week when Sarah will return to share her top 7 insights. I will, of course, include a link to the report in the show notes. Right, it's that time of the week to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. Well, tonight, I think we're going to... It's a classic that we have tonight because it felt like a classic kind of evening. And this will warm the cockles of your British heart, as it were. We're going to have a classic Vesper. And for those... the very few people, I suppose, who don't know what a Vesper is. It is very simple drink. It comes, of course, from James Bond. And, of course, James Bond is associated with the martini, shaken, of course, never stirred. But the Bond lovers will also know about the Vesper, which Ian Fleming created back in the novel Casino Royale, which, of course, is the Bond book, if you are into such things. And it's a very simple drink. It's basically just gin, vodka.
Ooh.
It's a mix, by the way.
Yeah.
And Lillet, which is a bit of a mixer, or if you will, or an aperitif, if you will. And just so it's 2 parts, 1 part, and half part of gin, vodka, and Lillet. So
Lillet. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
On the topic of Vespers, wasn't that that's the favourite drink of one of our chums, isn't it, Tim? Wasn't he a Vesper drinker? I've forgotten his second name, and it's really bad. He was at Digital Clarity Group.
Oh, you mean Tim? Yeah.
Yes,
of course.
Tim,
our good friend Tim.
Yeah, our good friend Tim, whose second name is escaping me completely for some mysterious reason.
Walters is his
Walters, yes, the good Dr. Walters, yes, who hopefully doesn't listen to the show, because
he did drink a Vesper on occasion, yes.
Yes. It's nice that I thought of him, and if I couldn't remember his second name, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
Anyway, so a classic Vesper, and where are we going to take these incredibly classy drinks this week, my friend?
Oh, well, there are many places where we could go. And of course, I guess the most obvious place would be somewhere in London. But where I want to go this week is we're going to head up to a place where I have been to a few times as a kid, because as we've talked about on the show before, my family hails from Scotland. Everybody on my mother's side, including my mother, came from Scotland, although they were Glaswegian, and we're going to head to Edinburgh.
Oh, lovely.
Because I love that town so much. It's so perfect. Yeah. It feels like the perfect place and this is the time of year to visit Edinburgh, of course. I think we sit in the Edinburgh Castle as it looms over the city and looks at all of the wonderful scenic outlook, and we can sit. I don't know that there's a bar up there necessarily, but we could certainly bring up our flasks of Vesper and pour ourselves a Vesper and overlook a wonderful city.
I love that. Yes, and also the James Bond's bound to come out, and I know I'm not going to ask you to do it now, but I know you do a very good Sean Connery. So I can imagine us. Yeah, I can't slip into it as well as I used to. So it would take some time and probably a couple of Vespers for me to do it. But yeah, I can imagine us up there. I have been known to slip into my Sean Connery. So I've got to shift that vision. So so after we're done with our exchanging our best Sean Connery impersonations and sipping these Vespers in that lovely city, Oh, hang on a minute. I've got to make the fucking drink. Yeah. Maybe you want to make something. Oh my God, 170 odd episodes and I've forgotten my own script. Right, I'm going to attempt to make that very drink using only the ingredients in my desktop bar. So I've just slung some ice into a glass and I'm going with Hendrick's Gin. Yes.
Well, that's part of it.
But I don't have any Lillet, or whatever it was you said.
Yes.
I only have cucumber tonic water from the lovely people at Fever Tree, which I should splash into there. And also, if I put in just a little bit more gin, that'll account for the vodka. So there you go. Put a splash of that in there. I can't believe I've forgotten how my own show works. Let's have a sip. It might be all these gins that's doing it, you know. That's delicious, Robert. And what are we calling this?
We'll be calling this the Vesper, which is not my name for it, but it is a big and classic drink, yes.
And it is shaken, isn't it, usually? Just to get back to it's shaken. What? It's a shaken drink, isn't it?
Oh, yes, indeed. Shaken, never stirred. Just like the martini.
I completely buggered all of that up. Anyway, so while we're sipping these lovely drinks, the conversation turns to marketing in our Sean Connery accents. What are we talking about this week?
It's good that you're back on track with the actual structure of your show. What we're going to talk about this week is a little bit about brand awareness and specifically measuring brand awareness. It's a question I got a lot, and it's actually a question that came in to the CMI inbox, and I ended up writing on it, and so thought we'd talk a little bit about it because it is increasingly becoming an important part of B2B marketing for sure, and been part of B2C marketing for a long time. And of course, when we ask how should we measure the value of our brand awareness efforts, the question isn't really how we should measure it, because of course the answer to that is just like, well, analytics is how you measure that. But what you really want to know when that question comes in is, okay, how do we connect brand awareness to business value, yes. Right? And so business value, of course, there's really only two, which is increased revenue or lower costs. And so, okay, how do you then connect brand awareness efforts that you're doing to either more revenue and lower costs? And it feels difficult, right? It feels tricky because with brand awareness, especially because it's so qualitative, it can be not unlike trying to figure out, well, if you look at a baseball player, for example, and trying to figure out, looking at an individual baseball player's statistics, how that draws a correlative line to team wins. You know that more is better, and you know that higher is better, but you don't really know how to connect it to how the team is doing. And so the key is to look at this in a very, very specific way, which is when we start thinking about brand and value, brand aware. It's important to understand the two words in that sentence, right? The brand awareness, because if we look at brand, of course, that is the idealized nature of ourselves. It's what we hope everybody believes about us, right? It is, what we hope that everybody will think that agrees with what we think about our brand. And then awareness, however, is just becoming aware of it to begin with. And so those two things work against each other, right? Because becoming aware of a brand doesn't immediately change people's perception of how trusted or valuable or like us that we want them to be. They just become aware of it. And so it's the very, very first part of a journey toward the ideal, which of course is becoming engaged and valuing our brand as a differentiated solution to whatever you're needing. And so when we start to think about that, it's like the journey before the journey, right? It's almost, how do I become aware of the journey that I want to take with a particular solution? And it's not that we can't necessarily connect that to cost savings or revenue. I mean, it would be simple, right? To go, oh, well, brand awareness, how many people come to my website is the number for that, and I'll just do the number of new website visitors versus the increased revenue, and I'll go, great, every new website visitor is worth X dollars. And it's like, no, that doesn't really work, because that's simple. That's too simple. And it basically devalues anything that happens after that first visit, right? It's like, oh, talking to a salesperson didn't matter. Engaging with marketing content didn't matter. Working with the product features didn't matter. It was all about that making you aware. So that's where people struggle. So the key is to look at those two things together and say, what is it that we're trying to achieve with better brand awareness? And of course, brand awareness, that equals a greater probability that someone will then start to like us more or engage with us more, which equals a greater probability of getting that person to be engaged with our product or features or whatever it is, which equals a greater probability of actual purchase. So that's where we could connect it. And so the question then becomes, how do we measure that probability? And it's literally, to bring it back to the baseball metaphor, it's like at bats, right? Basically, brand awareness gives you more at bats. And if you have more at bats, well, then you can make a correlation to say more at bats equals more hits, and that equals more. So it's connecting the brand awareness measurement to other levels of measurement that you may be doing, which it might be number of leads, number of engaged leads, number of engaged people, et cetera, how many people you get subscribed. And so if we start looking at the different methods of saying, okay, great, how do we set objectives for that? Like what do our objectives look like? Well, that gets hard too, because all of a sudden you're like, well, our objective is to increase revenue, or our objective is to save money. And it's like, okay, well, now I have to reverse engineer that all the way back to a brand awareness. It's like, no, let's just look at it at that greater probability. In other words, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to start creating awareness that can give us more at-bats to increase the value of the brand. And so we can say, okay, let's look at quantity of traffic as a percentage of our total addressable audience, or let's look at the quantity of conversions of known audiences, right? Newsletter subscriptions, the idea of subscribing to our blog or those kinds of things. Or we can even look at, just increased engagement, time on site, the kinds of engagement with our content. All of these are demonstrable to say that we're creating greater awareness. And if we can then connect that to the greater awareness equals more leads, more opportunities, more conversions to newsletters, well, those equal good things. And so if we set up an OKR, like literally an objective with key results, we can start to look at, great, how does brand awareness affect sales enablement? Because that's what correlates directly to revenue or cost savings. Then that's the quantity side. But we can also look at quality, right? Because what we're trying to do, remember, is increase the perception, the value perception of that person. Well, one of my favorite things to do is literally just do surveys and research and polls. And so if we can do, of course, we can do the classic brand recall things where we look at our target audience and how well do they recall our brand, or how well do they know our brand or understand what we do. But we can also do things like, interview the people who visit our website versus just general people. And we can start to draw metrics and differences and distinctions between the people who subscribe to our blog and become more favorable to our brand over time, or the people who engage with our webinars or our content and become more favorable. And we start asking them vis-a-vis our competitors or vis-a-vis our content competitors, like magazines or other influencers that sort of compete for the same audience attention. And now we can start triangulating those things. The awareness creates greater quantity. It also creates greater quality. And as we can triangulate those two things to say that gives us a greater probability for better leads or higher quality leads or more engaged opportunities or more engaged sales or higher conversions or any of those sort of more direct metrics that correlate directly to revenue or cost savings. Well, now we've actually created an objective and a measurable way to measure our brand awareness efforts that don't necessarily draw a direct line to revenue, but they draw a direct line to those things that create revenue. And it becomes an important thing to do, and it becomes an important thing to measure.
I love this topic because I think brand is coming back as a topic with CMOs. And I was actually at a CMO roundtable this week, and we discussed brand. And I think some of it has come. Some of my opinion has come from conversations with you about the fact that brand is a multiplier for all your other marketing efforts, right? Is that if you're doing PPC or something like that, and you're in a competitive keyword situation, and the person who's searching comes up with 5 or 6 options, all paid ads, which one are they going to select? Well, they're going to select the one that resonates with them, or they've got some brand recall with, or something like that, right? So you won't be able to attribute it, but maybe your brand is actually improving your PPC, for example, or any other strategy that you're using. I think it is it's a key multiplier. But one of the other things that I thought was the other things I thought was interesting about what you were saying there about sort of sizing up brand awareness. So would you think that there's an exercise here in understanding how much awareness do you actually need, right? In your business, particularly with us in B2B, right? We don't need to be known by everybody. We don't need to be known by our mums or whatever, even though a lot of executives want that kind of brand recall. But we just need to be known by a specific audience. Is that something as part of this methodology you just described? Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. It's for every product marketer, right? It's for every marketing strategy, which is, and it's a lost art in many ways because of how much I see businesses skimping out on the planning and research part of marketing strategy, which is understanding, and this goes back to marketing 101 that go back to Kotler or anybody, understanding your TAM, right? Your total addressable market and the numbers in there, right? So if I understand as a B2B organization that the total addressable market for my particular set of products and services is X, well, now I can understand how many I need to be, to have a disproportionate share of voice, right? And I can say, well, what do I need to, and basically, I mean, obviously the knee-jerk reaction is, well, 100%, of course. I need 100% awareness. And of course you don't, because there's a tipping point where you become sort of the most favored idea. And you can, of course, definitely run research and surveys and polls on this, on levels of brand awareness across that target market and see where you stack rank against competitors or others that are providing solutions like yours. But the other thing is to say, make the assumptions, draw it all the way down the funnel. And if you say, okay, now we have a measurement plan in place, right? And this is one of my favorite things to do, is to reverse engineer it. And you say, okay, given best practices, brand awareness, levels of X equals X amount of leads. I'm making this up, but just to keep it simple, right? And so you say brand awareness X equals X number of engaged leads, X number of engaged leads equals X number of opportunities, and X number of opportunities equals X number of customers, which equals X amount of revenue. And then if you say, great, our goal is to get to X revenue. Now I can start reverse engineering that and say, well, best practices says if we want X revenue, we're going to need X customers, which means X number of leads, which means an X number of opportunities, which equals X number of visitors to our website, which equals X number of people brand awareness. Now we can compare and we can go, are we shooting ourselves in the foot? In other words, is our TAM not big enough? Or are we shooting for 10%, 15%, 20% brand awareness? If we get 20% brand awareness, we'll know that that part of the funnel, that part of the buyer's journey is optimized, right? So if you've got 20, and if it works out to 20% of your brand awareness and you're still not meeting your revenue goals, well, the problem isn't brand awareness at that point. The problem is somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I love this. I've done that myself. Thought, target revenue. Well, I mean, I'm not unique in that. But I hadn't considered that far up the funnel, as it were, into brand awareness. I think this is
it gets fuzzier and fuzzier, right? I mean, it's not meant to be, as I've said before, agreement on the goals is much more important than the granular accuracy of the goals.
No, I love it. And I love the connection, because that's the conversation we're all having, is trying to connect the value of brand, which we know is valuable, and how we communicate that to the C-suite to say we should be investing in this, and this methodology sounds fascinating to connecting it actually with revenue. I think that's great. And have you seen your clients actually doing this?
In varying degree, yes. I mean, it's one of the things that's really hard is that brand work in B2B is one of those things that often goes forgotten. I mean, we've talked about this on this show before, that it can be a forgotten art of the B2B marketing, because we get so myopic around lead gen, and lead nurturing, which I call demand identification, not demand generation. And so, it becomes very, very incumbent on us as B2B marketers, especially if we're in a disruptive industry or something where you're trying to change the way that people do things, full stop, that you introduce them to that, right? That that you're constantly widening the top of the funnel as much as you can, because at some point you're just going to run out, right? I always use the metaphor, right? You walk into a theater full of people and you go, how many of you need soup? And you get a few people that raise their hand, but few people that don't. And then you go back in a few minutes later and you go, how many of you want soup? And maybe a couple of more raise their hand and a couple of more don't. And then you walk in and finally you go, how many of you want soup? And nobody raises their hand because you've asked everybody if they need soup in this moment and they just don't. And what you need is an effort to walk in and make soup really attractive. Like you need to go in and go, hey, by the way, you're not going to eat for 10 hours. Anybody want soup now?
Yeah. I love that. That's a great story. And also, I'd love to come back to that demand identification versus demand generation. But this whole topic for me is fascinating. I'd love to crack open another couple of these Vespers and keep chatting, but we're out of time. So, where can people find this kind of gritty insight? I think it's gritty. I think it's insightful.
Well, this gripping insight will be delivered to you in our wonderful wonderful website, which is contentadvisory.net, and in many ways through our wonderful Experience Advisors community, which is always fun because we have a newsletter that goes out that talks about and links to these things as we publish them.
You do indeed. And where can people when people spin the dial on the internet, Robert, where are they going to find you?
They're going to find me on LinkedIn mostly, and would love to connect with each and everybody out there in the audience. And LinkedIn and Twitter's like, meh, who cares?
And most important for me, will you be in the bar next week watching me fuck up my show again?
I will. Yeah, indeed. It's always a pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. As you heard, Robert has written more on that topic, and I'll include a link to that work in the show notes. So, that's a wrap on episode 167, the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff, Sarah and Robert for sharing their insight, and to you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. Please let us know what you think. Many of you have been so kind in your reviews we have coming through on Apple Podcasts, or you can contact us through our website, rockstarcmo.com. Catch us on the socials. We have Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn and Twitter, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, everyone will be back. Jeff will be in the studio. I'll be the one answering the questions. There'll be chat about content marketing. Sarah returns to dive deeper into that CMS Wire report. And Robert will be back in the bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.